Hey everybody, my name is Tom Whalen. Today I will be drawing one of my favorite all-time characters since I was a kid, RoboCop. I am a poster, pin, and packaging artist and illustrator. Right now, the big thing I'm working on is packaging for the new Power Rangers Lightning collection. So I started with a pencil sketch that I scan and kind of build knowing that I'm going to work it up in Illustrator. I wanted to put a little bit different color scheme on him than the normal blues and steel colors, but I may wind up going back to that, but I wanted to try purple at least a little bit off on the top. So I'm trying to keep layer organization, which is a big deal for me. For those that don't know vector programs, this is a Bezier pen tool that basically adds points wherever I click, and I can manipulate those points and get my curves and straight lines and keep everything along the lines of the where I need it to be as far as my sketch goes. At first I'm going to go pretty tight to where my sketch lines up. Once I get to a certain point, I can kind of take the training wheels off and get rid of the sketch and then do a little bit more, get a little bit more expressive with the lines. So I'm building his visor right now. Comic books are how I got into art in general. My grandmother owned a candy store, and I would spend weekends in the back of her store reading issues of basically whatever she carried. So when it came time for me to go to art school, I really had a very comic book style to my art, and it took a few years there until I realized that maybe that's not the best application for my skills. I was trying to over-render everything, and I can remember a professor speaking to me and telling me to keep things a little bit more graphic, and that really helped me and steered me in this direction of keeping things clean and using solid colors and block shapes, and that was a real turning point for my style. So I'm finding I need another color here for a shadow on the skin, so that's what I'm mixing. I mix all my colors in CMYK. So that, and then I make them, every one of them, a swatch so that I can change colors globally. I was doing a series of posters for a local theater in a town close to me. They had a series of films, and they still do to this day, called First Friday Fright Nights. And they would do a horror movie on first Friday of every month. I called them and asked if I could do a poster for that series once a month, and they were into the idea. And after we had done a year's worth, I kind of used that as a calling card and got a lot of attention online, and that's when Mondo contacted me to do some official licensed poster work for them. And we've been working together for almost 10 years now. And in addition to screen printed posters, I've done pins and soundtrack design for them. It's been a really great relationship. Right now, the big thing I'm working on is packaging for the new Power Rangers Lightning collection through Hasbro. And that's been really fun. Even though I don't know Power Rangers that well, it's been really fun working on designs that are so iconic and well received by the fans. They were just shown off at New York Toy Fair. So that's a big part of what I'm working on right now. I've gotten into more packaging projects lately as opposed to screen prints, so it's a nice change of pace. It keeps me fresh on both sides. I try to pull out the stuff in this upper left corner here that I use the most. The pen tool, the eraser, the shear tool. Again, I build so much from geometric shapes. It's really like some of the more simple tools that I find using more often than the more complex functions that Illustrator offers. So I'm just building some dimension onto these flat pieces now. I have to say the Disney posters that I've done usually wind up being some of the most favorite projects I work on, just because of how many times we've watched those movies with my kids, and Lilo and Stitch especially is probably one of my most favorite assignments that I've had. At the time when I did that for a company called Cyclops Printworks, they gave me the assignment, which I was thrilled about at the time. But now it's more collaborative what projects I take on. And I've done a lot of Disney stuff at this point, so it's nice to have some input as to which of the ones that are left I'd like to work on. So I'm just using some highlights here to define some areas where two light colors would meet. Like for example, in this area, highlight and shadow can give you some definition. And especially working in screen prints as much as I do, you're usually limited by color, so you have to use some different tricks. Color's not unlimited, so on a lot of my jobs, so you have to use some tricks to expand your number of colors or maximize your use of them. Now, as much as I wanted to take this in a purple direction, I feel like I'm going to push it towards blues. So that's why I keep all these colors built in that swatches palette, so that I can change them quickly. And I usually do this as I'm working. I'm never quite done fiddling with the colors until a job is out the door. I always find myself pushing for more contrast, or just experimenting with colors throughout the whole design process. By previewing it here, you can turn it on and off and see what you're doing live before you actually accept any of those changes. And this is all, again, just a feeling to mix these colors. A lot of people ask how I come up with palettes, and it really is just experimenting as I'm working. So I built this little, whatever this detail is on the armor, and just it kind of wraps around, so I'm going to mask it off so you build the whole thing and then mask it out so it doesn't hang off the edge there. Again, just cleaning up, using the shapes that I've built to keep lines parallel and curves equal. I use the Pathfinder tool here to create new shapes with the shapes I've made already. And we're probably at the point where I can leave the sketch behind and start to move some pieces. And I feel his head sits too low now, so I'm going to move it up. But we don't need to keep it in place anymore because the sketch has pretty much served its purpose. Again, this is a little hinge I'm building on the top of the armor. Has messy edges, so just draw it with a little bit of extension and then put a mask over top of it. It fools the eye into making it look like what it's supposed to. Just adjusting this one on the other side to give the proper perspective. I use Photoshop just a bit for sending files out for printing separations, but Illustrator is 99% handles 99% of my workload. It is different, definitely a different mindset to do a 1 inch by 1 inch pin as opposed to a 24 by 36 screen print. I find myself printing out the pins just on a printer just to see what they look like in real life, because obviously you can't get as much detail on an enamel pin as you would on a full poster. And even with posters, I find myself printing out portions of them just to see what they look like in real life for consistency of detail. That's a big concern of mine, is that if a poster is going to be 24 by 36 and hang on someone's wall, it has enough detail to carry that size. I use as many layers as makes sense. I'd rather have the ability, especially when you're going in and selecting so much tiny detail work, I'd rather have the ability to shut them all down and just leave one active. So I tend to, especially with a character, to break it up into head, neck, torso. And obviously this one doesn't have legs, but I break it up into body parts. A lot of the work at the end of this is really the details that make it pop the most. Little shadows and highlights. Just giving that eyepiece some bevel. call your eye towards it. I find it more difficult for me to do likenesses of human characters. I have to pull a lot of reference, and it just takes longer. That may be true with a lot of artists, but for me it takes a long time to really refine a likeness and get it to look simple and graphic and yet be true to the actor or actress. So more robotic and mechanical things are a little quicker for me. I would say that's about it. I'm Tom Whalen, and this was my RoboCop drawing.